A mysterious virus emerged to hit the lungs of dozens, then hundreds, and then millions later on. Coronavirus, or the so-called COVID-19, that set the world on fire. Many stations, most of them are painful, some of them are premature, and a few of them carry hope within it. As part of responding to an emerging pandemic since the beginning of the crisis, the state of Kuwait has taken all necessary measures to limit the spread of corona. As Kuwait lived lean years, and there was nothing new for it in challenging the crisis, especially in the year of the plague during 1831, which spread throughout Kuwait and killed thousands of its residents. It also lived the coronavirus year, but Allah Almighty wanted its ship to sail peacefully, to come to relief after a wise management of the crisis. From the history of Kuwaiti resilience and the face of the plague, we anticipate a new Kuwaiti steadfastness in the face of the coronavirus. Kuwait reported its first confirmed case early on February the 24th of 2020. The government took several measures to fight and contain the spread of the virus, such as an early border lockdown, suspension of travel, and closed all educational institutions, shopping malls, restaurants, gyms, mosques, and public gatherings, as well as offices and government entities were suspended. The Ministry of Health, in cooperation with government agencies and private companies, have also equipped field hospitals and rapid PCR testing centers. Let's go back a year ago and talk about the mechanism that the Ministry of Health have used since the first cases were reported. Joining us is the Director of PR and Media at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Ghada Ibrahim. Dr. Ghada, in the beginning, let's go back in memory. 1 year ago exactly, since the Ministry of Health have announced that 3 people got infected with COVID-19. What were the procedures that you followed?
The Ministry of Health has taken all the precautionary and preventive measures concerning the pandemic. As soon as we got the news from the WHO concerning that there's a pandemic going on in Wuhan in China that has spread all over the world, we got all the precautionary measures and the information necessary to encounter into the Ministry of Health and to all the bodies of the Ministry of Health concerning the healthcare workers, the medical staff, the hospitals, the preventive medicine.
What about the ministry's efforts with tests? And you have also designed the Shlonik application. Can you please tell us more about it?
The Ministry of Health has inaugurated several PCR testing sites. From them were Jaber Stadium, Jazeera Airways parking lot, and Sabhan area. For those people that were concerned about being infected or were having fears or having doubts about having some mild symptoms that could relate them to the COVID-19 infection. That's why the PCR testing was an option that they could register through that site, and they could go and take their PCR testing. Other areas were the field teams that were going into the governorates and doing these PCR testing as a random trials or random studies to see randomly those people that might be getting infected without having any symptoms. Another application was done, was the application of Shlonik. The Shlonik application was for those people that were self-quarantined because being infected with a COVID-19, like let's say there was a lady that she was infected with a COVID-19 infection and she was in hospital for 2 or 3 days, but after delivery, she wants to go home. She could continue on self-quarantine with the application of Shlonik, and we will follow up by phone calls and texting her to see how she's doing. And if in case she gets really sick or ill and she needs to be taken back to hospital, she's in contact with the Shlonik program and she could be directly directed to the hospital according to the area provided. And other application, with the application of Shlonik, other concerns was for those people that were mixed with the people that were infected. So if there's a suspicion for that person that he was infected with the person that got in contact with the person that was infected, he also downloads the application of Shlonik, and he will be quarantined with self-quarantine and will be followed up.
Dr. Ghada, how would you describe the efforts of the medical staff?
We would like to give special thanks to all the medical staff that have been working around the clock all year long for their support and for their dedication, for their work and the efforts that they've been given to support the Ministry of Health and to support the families of those that got infected. Still, the year has not passed. The pandemic is not through. They've been getting rises and, let's say, waves, ups and downs between the coronavirus patients in the wards or in the ICUs. We would like to thank them for their dedication and for their support. Still, we would tell you, be safe and be careful for yourself and your families.
The Directorate General of Civil Aviation played an important role during the crisis. The largest evacuation in the history of the state was launched for citizens who were stranded abroad. Under the direction of His Highness the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, and it is including 5 stages. The first stage was for the citizens from GCC countries, then Arab countries, until the third stage, which was for the United Kingdom and the US. In the fourth stage, students coming from Canada and Australia by Etihad Airways and Qatar Airlines, which were participant with the Kuwait Airways and Jazeera Airways to evacuate the citizens. All the various sectors participated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to success this process, as Ministry of Interior, the Kuwait Fire Force, Ministry of Health, charitable societies, and also the volunteers who are playing an important role in this crisis. Joining us from the Civil Aviation, the Deputy Head of Terminal 4 Operation Committee, Mr. Dhari Al-Awad. Mr. Dhari, the Civil Aviation played an important role during the crisis. Can you please tell us how were the preparations like from the start?
When it first started, we had several meetings with several parties to try to understand how the situation is going to be with this unknown virus that's spreading around the world. So we had many meetings and we had many precautionary measurements installed in the terminal. We worked day and night, and we still working day and night. We never stop during the weekends or the vacations.
Could you please tell us about the procedures you put in before announcing the first infections?
The state of Kuwait considered one of the pioneer countries that took a precautionary measurement in a way to stop the spreading of the virus by getting in Kuwait. And some of these measures is suspending the flights and passengers coming from China, South Korea, and Hong Kong. And also we had thermal cameras adjusted in the terminal to test and to check the passengers' temperatures, and that in the beginning it was a way to detect the virus and if any passenger had it on.
Also, how was the evacuation procedures?
The evacuation, we called it the Great Evacuation, that was launched by the directions of the late Emir of Kuwait, His Highness Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, and it included 5 stages to get the citizen back from abroad, and we had almost 40,000 plus citizen, Kuwaiti citizen coming back. The stages was from GCC, from Arab countries, from the UK and Canada, and the student, and the elder people or Kuwaitis that we have abroad. And it was approximately 179 flights during this period. And we had successfully, in cooperation with the various entities like MOH and Ministry of Health, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Ministry of Interiors, and the charity societies and the volunteers. We had huge efforts here in the airport, and we all worked as a family, and we all did good with the help of all entities and participating parties.
The airport was closed as part of a precautionary measure, but there were flights carrying those who violated the residence permits.
The arrival flights was suspended, but the airport kept operating, and we had many departing flights, and cargo flights are continued operating. They never stopped. And there is not only one specific kind of passengers. We had all nationals that was requested from their countries to get home, or they have requested their embassies here to get back to their countries. There was departing, and the airport was functioning with no stop. We only had the ban for the arriving passengers.
What about reopening the airport during August? Were there any challenges?
Every generation had their fights and challenges, and I think the COVID-19 is our fight and challenge, since it's one of the new viruses in the modern history that we never faced before. I think we had a huge burden on us to handle this virus and to have everyone to be safe, especially that the airport, it's the gate or the main gate that the virus can get into the country. We had many procedures. We had many precautions applied and installed in the terminal. We had rough times such as Ramadan. We had many challenges. The evacuation flights were in Ramadan. The DGCA was supplying all employees with food and beverages, especially in futur time or the suhoor time. We did not get home, so the Kuwaiti government had everything fixed and ready for us here at the terminal, so we can have our work to get smoothly. Everyone cooperated in this crisis. If we want to talk about volunteers or the private entities or the public entities, we all cooperated, and we even had emergency plan. If we have no workers in the airport, we have trained many of our workers that to do such a job as driving the ULDs or carrying the passengers' bags. And we had the evacuation plan included the sanitization of the passengers' bags and luggage. All what we were thinking of, that everyone need to get back safe to their beloved one and to their families, and we hope that we did all what we can to have reach our goal, and we will keep doing this till we had this crisis and we hope all to be safe and secure.
Thank you from the civil aviation. Now let's go to the United Kingdom with our student Khalid Al-Azmi, who was among the returnees to the country. Khalid, can you please tell us how Kuwait carried out the largest evacuation operation in the world, and how would you describe it?
It is one of those moments where you truly feel proud of being Kuwaiti and being a Kuwaiti citizen, because at times where everyone was looking at this lockdown from an economical perspective, Kuwait was looking at it from a humanitarian perspective and putting its citizens as a priority. It does make me feel proud.
How was your reception from the airport until your return home?
Everything really went smoothly from the start. if we're going to talk about the process that went on at the airport, Kuwait airport, everyone was really welcoming, even though they were doing like long hours of work. Everyone was smiling, and the swab went swiftly, and literally everything went smoothly. Even claiming our bags, we didn't have any problems. And I was home around like 40 minutes since my landing time.
To what extent are you affected by the decision of His Highness the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed to fast Ramadan among your family?
For me personally, it was one of those decisions that did affect me, because it was my first time to be back home during the holy month and to spend it with my family. So it did truly affect me, and I did really felt at that time that I did need to go back home and meet my family during this holy month, which did add a taste to this month.
Also, to what extent did the embassy stood beside you?
The embassy was with us from the beginning, and they did contact us a couple of times and did guide us with the numbers in case of emergencies, and they did keep an eye on us, and I didn't feel like there was anything much more for them to do. They did everything they can do at times where many people didn't know what they were doing.
Also, what would you like to say about the efforts of the State Department in the evacuation process?
I truly thank the government, especially the fact they tried to do everything at short time period, and obviously there will be some mistakes, but we can't look and try to pick the mistakes and pinpoint those mistakes when the whole greater picture was almost perfect, and it did reach perfection. Mistakes do happen, and no one had the protocol, and I truly thank them that they did all the efforts they can in a short time period, and allowed us to spend those uncertain times with our families, and especially that also our families were impacted with this lockdown and what was going on.
Khalid Al-Azmi, thank you for that, and we wish you and the students all the best. On the 26th of February, only 2 days after confirming the first case of COVID-19, the Ministry of Education have announced the suspension of all schools for 2 weeks. The Ministry of Education's leaders believed they would be able to resume once health protocols were developed. However, a few days after the Ministry of Education's announcement, the government suspended schools for 2 more further weeks. At that time, it became clear that students would not go back to schools under these circumstances. After teachers and administrative staff returned to work after a 6-month pause due to COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Education pointed out that various measures have been put in place to ensure the safety and health of the staff. Some of these measures included no more than 50% capacity of teachers, sterilization of all schools, and providing all schools with a budget for health requirements. For more details, with us, the English Literature Teacher General Supervisor, Suzanne El-Bsheti. Suzanne, staff returned to work after a 6-month pause due to COVID-19 pandemic. Can you please tell us more about the return?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the experience of the Ministry of Education during COVID-19. First, as a result of the pandemic, a state of emergency was declared in the country. So the Ministry of Education suspended schools and university studies to ensure the safety of all students and its personnel. During that time, an action plan was taken to complete the scholastic year 2019-2020 for all grades. All the personnel of the Ministry of Education returned to work with a great determination to implement the strategy of the ministry finalized for the benefit of the students. They really did great effort. In fact, everyone in the ministry exerted tremendous efforts to make the return a success. These efforts concerned teacher and learner training on e-learning, curriculum and Microsoft Teams, learning and teaching resources, and others.
The lessons in the first semester of the new academic year were conducted online. What do you think of this return?
Switching from traditional classroom to face-to-face instruction to online teaching in virtual classes makes the learning experience entirely different for students. It's not a surprise that despite the pandemic of COVID-19 and the unusual situation, we were impressed by the enthusiasm of our students and their performance, and the collaboration of our teachers, as well as the respectful parents during the first semester of online learning. They all had determination to compensate what had been missed because of the suspension of studies. They were also passionate to experience distance learning for the first time. As for training, logistics, and facilities, there was a commitment of the ministry leaders and academic supervision sectors to prepare a full whole package of teaching, learning, training, and resources to support both teachers and learners at the same time to ensure the success of distance learning. When it comes to learners, every learner in the state of Kuwait was trained to be familiar with e-learning and Microsoft Teams application before starting his classes. This training was done through online training and by hundreds of videos prepared by sincere team in the ministry. We mustn't forget the amazing, beneficial, and easy access e-learning content in Microsoft Teams application, which includes thousands of e-learning sources for all subjects. As each learner has easy access to more explanation, PowerPoints, audio materials, exams and quizzes, electronic exams, and even hundreds of videos video clips prepared by experts of the subjects. In parallel, the ministry applied recording of every synchronous and asynchronous lessons to give every learner more chance to watch the lessons more times for more understanding.
As a Teams program creating a rising generation through technology?
Microsoft Teams application and other learning resources have affected how our learners think, study, work, and socialize with others, even within their family life or with community life. It's a revolution for the new generation. It has re-evolved to become the hub of teamwork, a place where you can learn, meet, and collaborate all in one place, Microsoft Teams. As the COVID-19 outbreak continues, it is a need to engage students into remote learning, and enabling remote learning has never felt such importance.
How can a student develop himself during distance learning?
We always advise our learners to follow and try practical steps that may help in self-development during distance learning, such as developing time management strategies and establishing their own schedules to accomplish their goals. Also, finding ways to apply the new concepts will support returning the information they have learned. Students can develop themselves through taking the time to ask questions and engage and interact with instructors. Last but not least, students can get full benefit from online resources.
the Ministry of Interior was present with all of its units, especially special forces, which worked to impose a complete and partial curfew throughout the country, control the security situation during the curfew period, and control any violations. The role of the Ministry of Interior emerged through its security and awareness, raising dealings during the crisis by sending messages to residents in isolated areas with the use of drones to urge people to avoid gatherings in order to limit the spread of COVID-19. Captain Sarah Freidoun from the General Department of Public Relations and Security Media at the Ministry of Interior. Captain Sarah, for days the Ministry of Interior put its heroes in the various streets of Kuwait during the ban period. What is your evaluation of the efforts of these heroes?
Since the Ministry of Health announced the first coronavirus in the state of Kuwait on 24th of February 2020, and the Ministry of Interior worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Health to implement the health authorities' decisions, and part of MOI job was to apply the curfew in the country and make sure that all citizens and residents are abiding by the security and health authorities' decisions and instructions. No matter if the weather hot, cold, or it's day or night, the cops, our superheroes, did their job properly.
Despite the exceptional circumstances, Kuwait witnessed the 2020 national elections. How were the preparations?
The democratic wedding, as we call it here in Kuwait, is a very important occasion. There was full coordination between the Ministry of Interior and concerned ministries and authorities to achieve the security control in the electoral process in a manner that appropriate to the democratic state of Kuwait. The last year application was different from the previous years because of coronavirus restrictions. That's why the Ministry of Interior set up the schools and secured the locations with accordance with the health requirements to ensure the public health safety.
The Ministry of Interior played a role in cooperation with the charitable organizations and providing them with their needs by entering isolated areas. Can you please tell us more?
Indeed, the Ministry of Interior secured the location or the isolated areas and provided people there with the basic needs. Also helped the charitable organization to distribute the food stuff and all needs for citizens and residents in the isolated areas under high security and in accordance with health requirements.
Also, what about the awareness campaigns provided by the security media team?
The General Department of Public Relations and Security Media used all media channels, the classic, the new one, in addition to social media platforms to reach big and large segment in the society. Also used up to 9 languages to send our awareness campaign, awareness messages. Also, we used new techniques like the flying drone cameras with the speakers to send the awareness messages, in addition to the TV, radio, and social media advertisements and programs.
Kuwait opened its embrace to receive residency violators and give them an opportunity to leave the country. How can we value this opportunity?
The Ministry of Interior was the right hand of the Ministry of Health during this pandemic, and the MOI was ready to contribute in any solutions to reduce the spread of coronavirus in the country. That's why the Ministry of Interior exempt the residency law violators of paying the legal fines or air ticket to leave the country. Also, the ministry offers free shelters with 3 free meals daily. The shelters were prepared accordance to health requirements. There was a place for the kids to play safely. Also facilitate their procedure in the airport to leave the country or to depart safely.
when a crisis hits. It is easier to respond if you already have useful tools in place and if you are prepared to innovate, reshape, and move fast. One prime example is Youth Public Authority, volunteering in the time of COVID-19. Initiative in the state of Kuwait, this builds on a youth volunteer program that was underway before COVID-19 forced the country into lockdown. And that has adapted at speed to meet the challenge of the new normal. Now, these young volunteers are taking a lead in shaping initiatives in their own communities to support the worldwide response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The wheels were already in motion. Youth Public Authority had been working to create a network of youth volunteers. The task has been to adapt this approach in the face of COVID-19. Youth, long known for their strong role in society, have shown their true courage, spirit, and determination during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, they have once again risen to the challenge during a crisis. We've seen them mobilize across all facets of life, from first responders to engineers, scientists, and community volunteers. They are truly on the front lines of this battle. With us, Mr. Shafiq Sayed Umar, the Acting Director General for Youth Public Authority. Mr. Shafiq, can you please tell us about the participation of youth in this crisis?
Actually, our youth volunteers have responded very swiftly towards helping Kuwait demands during the epidemic COVID-19, and we were extremely impressed by their response from day one.
What roles did the youth play or were included in?
They have done so many great things to Kuwait, and this is because of the culture for the volunteering in Kuwait from the past. So our youth were the first people to join the volunteering sessions with the YPA, and they have requested to help in so many areas that was needed by Ministry of Health, Ministry of Interior, corporate societies, and they were the frontiers or the frontliners, honestly, without a fear of the pandemic disease. And actually we were surprised to receive around 3,000 volunteers to help Kuwait at that time.
Why might people be prompted to volunteer during the COVID-19 epidemic?
This is a very crucial thing. Volunteering is helping the country to reduce even the budget, and this culture is very demanded for Kuwait, and with the situation, so many crises Kuwait has been seeing during even the invasion of Kuwait. The youth volunteers were the frontliners. During this crisis, they were the frontliners. So we have to help this sector as being part of the Kuwait program, especially the volunteers. With our experience with YPA during the 7 years, we have created so many great relationships between us and the volunteers, supporting their initiatives. Before the crisis was helping cleaning the beaches, doing and helping the societies, working with us in our youth centers around Kuwait. We cannot work without them, and we see it's very essential to be close to them.
What can the Youth Public Authority learn about volunteering from the current crisis?
We have learned so many things that it's there in our structure as a department for the volunteers. We have seen that the culture of Kuwait and the society is part of the responsibilities to volunteers. I even recall that the National Youth Policy has a huge domain for the volunteering work and objectives. So what we see that we have some few initiatives and some programs to give the volunteers this culture and to become useful for the country.
What would you like to say for them?
As part of a Kuwaiti member, I totally appreciate, and we are so proud of the volunteers, and mainly the youth volunteers, whom are be able to succeed for any crisis that could happen, God forbidden, in the future. And the YPA is always in need to youth volunteers.
Mr. Shafiq, thank you for the effort, and also special thanks to the youth members. Now we will continue with the same framework. As we know, the civil society organizations have registered strongly through public interest associations and voluntarily groups, as well as government efforts to support first-class workers in the face of the coronavirus. Also, on the charitable level, charities have prepared their food baskets and distributed them to individuals and families under the supervision of the Ministry of Affairs. Charities and people in Kuwait have raised more than 9 million Kuwaiti dinars in one day to support the country's government in combating the coronavirus outbreak. The fund was launched by the Ministry of Social Affairs, and 41 charitable associations took part by donating via an online link. Let's talk about the charities and their efforts. Al Salam Society is one of the associations that participated in the crisis. We have with us Mr. Dari from Al Salam. Mr. Dari, can you please tell us more about the beginning of the epidemic?
At the beginning of the corona pandemic here in Kuwait, Al Salam charity take a decision to try to help as much as they can to help people exactly on lockdown area like Farwaniya, Hawali, Mahbula and Salmiya, cooperative with different ministries here in Kuwait, and we are trying to help like giving a food basket and hot meals and medical boxes. Actually, a lot of volunteers are help Al Salam charity.
Charitable societies played an important role, especially in the Faz'at Kuwait campaign. Can you please tell us more about that?
Actually, Kuwaitis societies or the charity who's working in Kuwait are famous in humanitarian side and helps people all over the world. Especially here in Kuwait, when we face this virus, we get together all charity to work against this virus, especially with Faz'a Kuwait campaign. It was really something good to work together, and it was a first time all the charitable societies are working together in one campaign. $9 million Kuwaiti dinars were collected. How was that money spent? We have collected more than 9 million Kuwaiti dinar in just 12 hours, and this is a very huge number. And as a Salam charity, especially, we got around 500,000 Kuwaiti dinar. We spent all this money within 2 or 3 months inside Kuwait by giving need people and families and who stopped their work in Corona, especially inside the lockdown areas. Like we are giving medical boxes, sanitizers, masks, and a lot of hot meals, more than 1 million hot meals by cooking in our special kitchens. And we deal already with a lot of hotels and very big restaurants to provide these meals into in need people.
Thank you, Mr. Dari, and we also cannot forget your effort and the efforts of all charitable societies. The government has worked in full capacity to contain the spread of the virus and mitigate its potential harm, indicating that all the decisions taken by the government were at the request of the Ministry of Health and coordinated with the World Health Organization. In light of the efforts made by the state of Kuwait, the government and the people to confront this epidemic and continue to implement development plans, and important full year of the nation's life has passed in the face of the corona epidemic, which requires everyone to continue solidarity and cooperation to cross this ordeal peacefully. Greetings shall be extended to the heroes of the front lines for their efforts and conditions, which affirm their love for Kuwait and those who live on its land. They exerted a year of unlimited giving. From this place, we salute them and pray to Allah to remove the gloom from the whole world. We ask Allah to protect Kuwait from all harm.